We love talking about customer service and call centres here on the Business Breakfast. And as always, we always have a tremendous listener response when we do. The Middle East Call Centre Conference and Exhibition is taking place in Dubai from the 4th to the 7th of June, with most of the activity crammed into the 5th and 6th of June. We're pleased to welcome to the studio now a man heavily involved in the call centre industry. He has his own consultancy specialising in call centres, and he'll be presenting at the conference. He claims in his bio to have slashed call centre operating costs for fast food operators and rewarded them with a 50% increase in revenue overnight. To find out how we're pleased to welcome Dr. Brownell O'Connor, Customer Experience Consultant and Contact Centre Doctor, into the studio. Good morning to you, Brownell. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good morning.
Firstly, I'd like to ask you about call centres and why we all get so annoyed at them. Are they simply bad at their jobs, or do we just hate phone menus and waiting for ages on the phone, or are we the problem?
Well, I think you've mentioned two things there that we should think about. The first thing are the phone menus, and I think the majority of people do not like using machines. They want to talk to a human being. But companies seem to convince themselves that customers prefer machines, and they implement more and more machines in an almost delusional attack on the customers. The other side of it is that, in fairness, there are a lot of bad call centres out there. And senior managers often think that implementing a call centre is easy. And one of my mantras is, if it's easy, why are there so many bad call centres? So I think we have lots of problems in the industry.
Is it all down to price in the end, down to money? That machines are cheaper?
Well, yes, the automation is down to the fact that the machines are cheaper, and it's a less costly way to do business. But it's also, in many respects, it's an oversight on the part of the business, because they forget that the way to sell to a customer is to talk to them and understand the customer's needs. So they put the customer into an automated service, they never actually speak to the customer, and they lose enormous opportunities to develop that customer further.
So why are call centres so bad, to ask you your own question back?
I think that the primary reason is that businesses are governed, or businesses are managed and controlled by accounting standards in many cases. And if you think about the act of a call centre agent speaking to a customer, it's very hard to put a value on that and say what value was generated by that conversation. And as a result, the accounting departments are usually loath to give the call centres the budgets they need to actually achieve the ultimate goal.
So then it does come down to money. It comes down to companies not putting enough money into their call centres.
It comes down to companies not putting enough money into call centres. And maybe I should add something that in many respects is a little bit controversial here, because even though I'm a call centre consultant, I don't agree with spending silly amounts of money to deliver great customer service. I think you have to deliver just the right level of customer service to keep customers happy. So when I'm saying companies are not putting enough money into call centres, I'm not suggesting it should be an infinite amount of money. I'm saying there is actually a calculable amount that should be invested, and companies are not doing that presently.
What are the main complaints that you hear about call centres?
From Malcolm, it's interesting if I turn that question around a little bit. You're asking about complaints I hear from consumers or from customers. You know, interestingly, I hear more complaints from the agents themselves, complaining about the fact that they want to help customers and they want to make the customers' lives easier, but senior management won't let them, or the accountants won't let them, as the case might be.
I find it very hard to believe that senior management say, look, don't make the customers' lives easier, don't help the customer.
It's not that, but they are saying that, but in a different way. They often say things, for example, like you have to limit your average handle time to a maximum of 2 minutes. So the agents are forced to get you off the telephone within 2 minutes. So while they're not directly saying don't make the customer happy, they're limiting the agent's abilities to make the customer happy at the end of the day.
So we're talking about sort of KPIs there. Are the KPIs that are being set things like, calls need to be answered within a certain amount of time, you can only be on the phone for a certain amount of time, how many calls agents need to deal with a day? Are those KPIs, instead of actually sort of increasing the efficiency of the call centre, making the process worse?
Actually, Brandy, I think you've really hit on the crux of the problem here, is that many call centres are managed to achieve numbers, not to achieve customer satisfaction. So if they answer 1,000 calls today, they go away very, very happy with themselves. They don't really care about whether the customer is happy or not, and that's a huge
So it doesn't
problem
matter whether those 1,000 calls resulted in people actually getting their queries answered or their problem solved.
Exactly. As long as the machine gives out the right number, the management are happy.
So what are the absolute basics that a call centre must get right?
My belief is that the first and foremost thing a call centre should be aiming for is first call resolution. And basically the idea is that if you call, by the time the call is finished, you go away happy and satisfied that your problem has been solved. And don't worry about, if it takes an extra 10 seconds to answer the call, I live with that if I get my problem resolved at the end of the day. So I think dealing with first call resolution is something that call centres really need to focus on.
And so how would you define, if those are the basics, how would you define the gold standard for call centres? What criteria should people be really aiming for?
Well, one of the problems you have with call centres is that they're in every industry. And if I can, just use an analogy of a hotel environment, you have 2-star hotels and you have 5-star hotels. And I will go to a 2-star hotel for one thing and I'll go to a 5-star hotel for something else. Depending on the type of business you have, you either need a 2-star call centre or a 3-star call centre or a 5-star call centre, as the case might be. So you can't say there is a global standard, but what we have done, in fact, is we have developed a matrix that identifies different types of business strategies, and depending on the type of strategy your business falls into, we can identify what your target should be.
So are you saying that people, that companies knowingly put in a 2 or 3-star call centre saying, well, we don't really care about the customers very much, let them wait, it's going to be cheaper to do this? I mean, how and why would anyone do that?
Well, you're absolutely right, they do. In fact, I don't know if anyone's aware of Ryanair, if you've ever flown with Ryanair, the European airline. And Michael O'Leary, exactly. And Michael O'Leary gets a lot of bad press because of the way Ryanair operates, and Ryanair basically has what is identified as the worst customer service on the planet. And yet, Ryanair's customers are extremely loyal to Ryanair, and they go back again and again. So Ryanair don't need to worry about having a 5-star call centre because their customers just want cheap. So for Ryanair's business strategy, it's actually okay for them to have a bad call centre. It works for them, and customers still keep coming back again and again, even though the service is not so good.
Heaven forbid other companies should pick up on that idea.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be suggesting...
Our customers love us, we don't need a good call centre.
I wouldn't be suggesting Emirates Airlines do that. But
we've had a few texts in asking questions or to be directed at you, and one of those was about culture and language. How much of that is a barrier to good call centering?
It's actually interesting that they should mention culture and language in the same text, because there used to be a trend within the industry which was to build very large call centres and serve multiple languages from one centre. And what we realised maybe 10 years ago was that language is not just about words and phrases. Languages is also about culture. And whilst I can teach you a language and I can even teach you accent, it takes an awful long time to teach you culture. So what we have found is that it's often better to try and serve languages in their home country rather than trying to serve them internationally or globally. So even in the Middle East now, we see a lot of telcos, for example, and they serve their Arabic and English calls from call centres in the Middle East, but their Indian-speaking calls will be transferred to India, Tagalog-speaking calls will be transferred to the Philippines, and so on. So they're dealt with by people who understand the language and the culture.
Realistically, what percentage of customers do you think should be happy after a call centre interaction? I guess you're never going to please everybody.
Absolutely, you're never going to please everybody. And there's 2 types of customers. There's the target customer and the non-target customer. So the target customer is the customer I genuinely want in my business. And the non-target customer is a customer who just happens to join me and is not perfect for my business. If we're talking about target customers, we'd be looking at trying to make more than 90% of them happy. If we're talking about the non-target customers, even if we made 50% of them happy, we'd be happy enough with that.
Dr. Brownell, I'd like to know a bit more about what you think about call centres in this area. I mean, you've been working for years with companies here, and you know a lot about the kind of service that we get over the phone. What do you think about it? How do we rank compared to other areas?
In some areas we rank better, in other areas we rank worst. But the area that we rank better in the region is in the area of technology. So companies are very willing to spend lots and lots of money on technology. Where we rank worst is in the area of training. So interestingly, we find Middle East businesses are quite happy to invest large capital sums buying more and more automation. It, of course, never solves any problems, but the thing that will solve the problem usually is training the people at the end of the telephone, and they are very, very reluctant to train the people.
Now, that's what we often see on shop floors as well. You will, encounter staff who'd love to be able to help you, but haven't always been, sort of trained to a level that they can. Why is that, do you think?
Well, it's a bit of a vicious circle, actually. We talk a lot about staff empowerment, so basically giving the staff the authority that they need to do the things to solve your problem. And when you go into a store and you find that the staff is talking about escalating your problem to an appropriate department, usually what it signifies is that management don't trust that staff member to make those decisions.
Thank you, because that is the bit that drives me absolutely mental. If I do end up losing it on the phone with a call centre, the bit that I can sort of feel the blood pressure sort of rising, is the fact that I'll have someone on the other end of the phone who's being perfectly polite, perfectly nice, everything else, but isn't empowered to do anything. Because at the end of the day, if the person on the other end of the phone isn't allowed to make any decisions and isn't allowed to actually make any changes, there's often not a lot of point in talking to them. Bless them, but not their fault, but absolutely maddening for the person on the other end, me, who's trying to get something done.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I had a personal situation a number of years ago here in Dubai with my bank, where my ATM card was blocked for security reasons. And they needed to replace my ATM card. So the call centre told me I needed to go to the branch in 1 week to pick up my new ATM card. When I went to the branch, there was no ATM card there. But the bank actually had a rule, and I believe they still have the rule to this day, that the staff in the bank were not allowed to talk to the staff in the call centre. So the branch were telling me that there was no card in the branch. The call centre were telling me that there is a card in the branch for me. But the bank staff in the branch and the bank staff in the call centre were not allowed to talk to each other. So I was stuck in the middle trying to translate messages, and it took me an entire 8 months to get a replacement ATM card as a result of that.
Oh, brilliant. I had an instance last week where I made a transfer that was quite important on the Thursday morning last week from my bank here, big international bank, and then on Sunday evening I got a call from a call centre in India, so it's effectively 4 days later, 2 working days, but 4 days later, saying actually the IBAN number was 1 digit short, which I didn't think it was, but I mean, they're saying it was. But 4 days later, which was not good enough for an urgent telegraphic transfer. Lucy, you've had experience of this as well, haven't you, with banks?
Yeah, do you know, it's actually very similar to what Brownell just mentioned there. Last week, I went to pay a check-in at my bank. You know, they have those automated machines now where you can pay a check-in. So I paid my check-in. It ate it and gave me a receipt saying, your transaction has a problem with it. Please contact your branch. The branch was closed, so I called the call centre. They told me there was nothing they could do because they couldn't speak to the bank. I said, could you let them know that this has happened? I'm not going to be able to get back here until tomorrow afternoon because I work. And they said, no, we can't contact the branch directly, and they couldn't give me a number for the branch.
So plenty of anecdotal evidence there, Brownell, that banks are certainly high on our list of hates when it comes to call centres. Is that just because that's, we use them probably more than any other type of call centre, or are they particularly bad?
Well, banks are the largest users of call centres globally, with telcos coming in a very close second to them. But the other problem with banks is that they've built up their institutional hierarchies over the years, and the ivory towers, if you will, within the organisation are not crumbling. So the part of the organisation that does, for example, the IBAN processing, they do not like to release that to a call centre because they feel that it's their particular right to carry on that process. So the result is you have call centre agents who can be trained to do whatever needs to be done, but the various people within the organisation do not want to train them.
Let's have a look at some of your stories about CRM, because in your bio to us, you did say that you slashed call centre operating costs for fast food operators and rewarded them with a 50% increase in revenue overnight. Tell us that story.
Well, it was actually my first foray into call centres, and call centres, fast food operators at the time, when they advertised, they couldn't advertise a single telephone number because they wouldn't have a call center. So they would have send out a menu, and there would be a list of telephone numbers on the menu, and you would have to call the store that was closest to you to order your food. And the trouble with having all of that is that when you have a list of 20 telephone numbers, it becomes very difficult to advertise on TV. So what we did was we implemented call centres for the fast food operators so they could put an ad out during a hockey game or during a football game that says, if you would like pizza now, dial 1-800-4-PIZZA. As a result of being able to advertise one single telephone number, we got an immediate 30% increase in the number of telephone orders that we received. But where it got really interesting was that because we had trained staff working in a call centre who weren't worried about the pizza coming out of the oven anymore, those staff were able to engage the customer in upselling and cross-selling. And as a result of that, we also got a 30% increase in the average order value.
Is that the would you like fries with that sort of approach?
Yeah, would you like fries with that? Can I give you a dessert or a 2-for-1 offer or something like that? Yeah.
How different is pre-sales call centering to post-sales? Obviously, when you think of call centers, you tend to think of after-sales support, but this is obviously pre-sales. How different are they?
Again, that's a very interesting question, Malcolm, because if you look at maybe 3-4 years ago, there was a big buzzword in the Middle East call center industry, which was service to sales. And what companies were trying to do was to encourage agents, or even mandate agents, that if you called with a customer service query, they would try to sell you something. And the agents were often deducted pay if they didn't try to sell you something in every single call. So what call centres were trying to do was to effectively merge the world of service and the world of sales. Needless to say, it collapsed. It didn't work because customers rejected the idea. If a customer calls for service, they want help. And the agent should be there to help them and should not be trying to sell. So our motto is that you should keep the two completely separate.
Is there a rule of thumb about how much certain industries should be paying on getting their call centre right, maybe as a percentage of turnover or per customer figure?
Well, I wouldn't say there's a rule on a per customer figure or anything like that, but what we would say as a guideline is that you need to understand the value created by the call centre and apportion a budget according to that. So if we take the service call, the customer calls in with a problem, then the value created by that service call is that the customer stays with you and continues to give you money. So whatever sales are generated by that customer after the service call, those sales should be somehow or other attributed to the value created by the call centre, and a budget should be assigned accordingly.
How is the internet changing all of this? Things like Skype in certain regions, things like being able to get people to call you back. How does that change the call centre?
Interestingly, if you look at the US market, we see a lot of call centres actually supporting Skype. So Skype is just part of their telephone system, and customers will Skype in, in the way they would use a normal telephone. Because of the internet telephony restrictions here in the region, we don't see that happening. So regionally, I think the only